The massive alien warship moved through space like a giant metal beast. Inside its gray halls, strange sounds echoed as the crew went about their daily tasks. The ship was called Dominion's Edge, and it belonged to the Cytherian Empire. The Cytherians were tall, strong aliens with tough blue skin and forearms. They had conquered many worlds across the galaxy. In the recreation room, a group of Cytherian soldiers sat around metal tables. They were laughing loudly at something on their screens. Lieutenant Zarkith, a young warrior with bright orange eyes, held up a small device that showed human text. "Listen to this," Zarkith said with a grin. "These humans have a story about something called the Alamo. A small group of their soldiers stayed in an old building while thousands of enemies surrounded them. They knew they would die, but they fought anyway." The other soldiers burst into laughter. Their translator devices turned the human words into their own language, but the stories still sounded crazy to them. "Why would anyone do that?" asked another soldier named Krelvis. "Smart warriors run away when they cannot win. Only fools fight when death is certain." Zarkith scrolled through more human files on his screen. Here is another one. They call it Thermopylae. 300 human warriors fought against thousands and thousands of enemies. They all died, but they think this makes them heroes. The laughter grew louder. To the Cytherians, these human stories sounded like bad jokes. Their own military training taught them to be smart and practical. If you could not win a fight, you should retreat and find a better way to attack later. Dying for no reason was just stupid. "Look at this," Zarkith continued. "They have stories about soldiers jumping on explosives to save their friends. They write about warriors charging into enemy fire to rescue wounded comrades. Do they think we are children who believe in fairy tales?" From the back of the room, Commander Vexthul watched his soldiers enjoy themselves. He was older than the others, with deep scars across his face from many battles. His 4 arms were crossed as he listened to the human stories. Unlike his troops, he did not laugh. The Cytherians had captured these human files during a recent battle near a place called Centauri. It had been an easy victory. The human ships were small and slow. Their weapons were weak compared to Cytherian technology. The aliens had expected the humans to surrender quickly, like most other species did, but something had bothered Vexthul during that fight. The humans had not given up, even when their situation was hopeless. They had kept firing their guns until their ships exploded. Some had even rammed their small vessels into Cytherian warships, causing damage but destroying themselves in the process. "Commander," Zarkith called out, "come listen to these funny human stories. They claim their warriors never retreat. They say humans would rather die than run away from a fight." Vexthul walked over to the table. The other soldiers made room for him, still chuckling at the human tales. The commander looked at the screen, showing human military records. The files contained thousands of stories about battles, heroes, and last stands. "Sir," said Krelvis, "these humans must be very bad. At war, every story ends with them dying. How did their species survive if they are so foolish?" The commander studied the text on the screen. The human writing was simple, but the stories were detailed. They told of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when faced with danger. Soldiers who carried wounded friends for miles through enemy territory. Firefighters who ran into burning buildings to save strangers. Police officers who stood between criminals and innocent people. "Perhaps," Vexthul said slowly, "we should ask our human prisoner what he thinks of these stories." The soldiers looked surprised. They had almost forgotten about the human they had captured during the Centauri battle. He was locked in a holding cell deep in the ship. Most alien prisoners begged for mercy or tried to bargain for their lives. But this human had said nothing for weeks. Why would we care what he thinks? Zarkith asked. He is just a weak creature from a primitive world. Vexthel did not answer right away. He was thinking about something that puzzled him. In all his years of fighting, he had never met prisoners like this human. Most captives broke down after a few days of questioning. They would tell the Catherians everything they wanted to know. But the human remained silent and calm, as if being captured meant nothing to him. "Bring him here," the commander ordered. 2 guards left the room and returned a few minutes later with the human prisoner. He was much smaller than the Catherians, with pale skin and dark hair. His clothes were torn and dirty from weeks of imprisonment, but his eyes were clear and steady as he looked around the room. The human's name was Jake Morrison. Though the Catherians only knew him as prisoner 7439, he had been a captain in the human space navy before his capture. Now he stood quietly between his guards, showing no fear of the large alien warriors surrounding him. "Tell us about your stories," Vexthel said in English. The Catherians had learned human languages to help with interrogations. Jake looked at the screen showing human military history. A small smile crossed his face, but he said nothing. "These tales of your warriors," the commander continued, "are they true? Did humans really fight impossible battles just to die with honor?" The human captain remained silent. He had not spoken a single word since his capture, no matter what the Catherians did to him. His quiet strength frustrated the aliens, who were used to prisoners who begged and pleaded. Zarkith laughed. "See? Even he knows these stories are lies. No real warrior would be so stupid." But Vexthel noticed something the younger soldier missed. When Jake heard the word lies, his hands tightened into fists. His calm expression did not change, but there was fire in his eyes. The human cared about these stories, even if he would not talk about them. The commander dismissed the prisoner, and the guards took Jake back to his cell. But Vexthel continued to think about what he had seen. There was something about the human that did not match what the stories suggested. According to the files, humans were weak and emotional. Yet this prisoner showed strength that impressed. Even veteran Catherian warriors doubt. As the soldiers returned to laughing at human tales, Vexthel made a decision. Soon they would attack a human colony world called New Haven. It would be another easy victory for the Catherian Empire. But the commander wanted to see for himself if these human stories had any truth to them. He had a feeling he was about to learn something important about their new enemies, something that might change how the Catherians thought about this strange species called humanity. The Catherian fleet moved through space toward the human colony world of New Haven. Commander Vexthel stood on the bridge of his warship, watching the blue and green planet grow larger on the main screen. Intelligence reports said the world had only a small group of human defenders and maybe 50,000 civilians. "Sir," reported the communications officer, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." Vexthel nodded. "Put it on the main screen." The image changed to show a human woman in military uniform. She had short brown hair and calm blue eyes. Her name was Lieutenant Colonel Amy Carter, though the Catherians did not know this yet. She stood in what looked like a command center, with other humans working at computers behind her. "This is the commander of New Haven Defense Force," Amy said in a clear voice. "You are not welcome in this system. Leave now, or face the consequences." The bridge crew of the Catherian ship started laughing. Lieutenant Zarkith, who was working at a weapons station, could barely contain himself. Did she just threaten us? A handful of humans against the entire Catherian fleet? Even the usually serious bridge officers were smiling. The human commander looked so small and weak compared to their mighty warships. The Catherians had 47 ships in their fleet, each one bigger and more powerful than anything the humans had ever built. "Sir," said the tactical officer, "our scanners show they have only basic planetary defenses. a few missile launchers, and some old energy weapons. We could destroy them all in minutes. Vexthul studied the human woman on the screen. She did not look afraid, even though she was facing impossible odds. Her voice had been steady, and her eyes showed no fear. This reminded him of their prisoner Jake Morrison, who also showed no fear despite being captured. "Response?" asked the communications officer. "No response," Vexthul said. "Begin the invasion as planned." The screen switched back to show the planet. Across the fleet, Kitherian soldiers prepared for battle. They checked their weapons and put on their armor. Many of them were still joking about the human commander's threat. "I bet they surrender." "Before we even land," said one soldier. "Maybe they will tell us more funny stories about their brave warriors," said another. But Vexthul was not laughing. Something about the human transmission bothered him. The commander had not sounded like someone about to lose a hopeless battle. She had sounded like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The first wave of Kitherian dropships launched from the fleet. These were large, heavily armed vessels that could carry 50 soldiers each. They flew down through the planet's atmosphere like metal birds of prey. The pilots expected to find panicking humans running in all directions. Instead, they found organized resistance. The first dropship to reach the surface was hit by a missile as soon as it entered the landing zone. The explosion sent burning metal flying in all directions. The second ship managed to land, but human soldiers were already waiting for them. They had dug trenches and built barriers, turning the landing area into a trap. "What is happening down there?" Vexthul demanded from the bridge. "The humans are fighting back, sir," reported the tactical officer. They seemed to have prepared defensive positions. On the ground, Kitherian soldiers were learning that humans did not fight like other species. When aliens had superior firepower, most enemies would retreat or surrender. But these humans did something different. They fought harder. Sergeant Pete Collins crouched behind a concrete barrier, firing his rifle at advancing Kitherian troops. The aliens were taller and stronger than humans, with better weapons and armor. But Pete and his squad had something the aliens did not expect. They had been preparing for this fight their whole lives. Every human on New Haven had grown up hearing stories about heroes who fought against impossible odds. They knew about the soldiers at the Alamo, the warriors at Thermopylae, and the firefighters who ran into burning buildings. These were not just stories to them. They were lessons about how to act when everything looked hopeless. "Johnson, take your team around the left flank," Pete ordered. "Make them think we have more soldiers than we do." Private Danny Johnson nodded and led his 3-man team toward the enemy position. They moved carefully, using the landscape to stay hidden. Danny had read about guerrilla warfare tactics used by human fighters throughout history. Now he was using those same methods against alien invaders. The Kitherian soldiers advanced with confidence. Their scanners showed them exactly where the human defenders were positioned. They had better weapons, better armor, and more troops. This should have been an easy victory. But something was wrong. The humans were not fighting like a desperate, defeated army. They were fighting like they had a plan. Every time the Kitherians advanced, they found new obstacles. When they tried to surround human positions, the defenders would fall back to new defensive lines that seemed to appear out of nowhere. "Sir," reported a Kitherian squad leader over the radio, "the humans are using tactics we have never seen before. They are not trying to hold ground. They are trying to make us pay for every step forward." Vexthul frowned as he listened to the battle reports. His forces were advancing, but slowly, and they were taking more casualties than expected. Much more. On the planet's surface, Amy Carter watched the battle from her command center. She had spent years preparing for this moment. Every human officer in the Colonial Defense Force had studied the same military history that the Catherians found. So amusing. They knew they could not win a direct battle against superior alien technology, but they did not need to win. They needed to prove a point. "Colonel," said her communications officer, "we are receiving evacuation requests from the civilian areas." "Tell them to follow evacuation plan Delta," Amy replied. "All civilians should be clear of the combat zones within 6 hours." The evacuation plan was another thing the Catherians had not expected. Instead of using civilians as shields or abandoning them to save themselves, the human military was actively helping people escape. Transport ships were launching from hidden bases, carrying families to safety while the soldiers fought to buy them time. This confused the alien invaders. In their experience, weak governments would either surrender immediately or use their own people as hostages. These humans were doing neither. They were fighting to protect people they could not save and helping those they could save escape. "Sir," the tactical officer reported to Vex Thul, "the humans are evacuating their civilians." Should we target the transport ships? The commander considered this. Attacking civilian ships would end the resistance quickly. But something stopped him. No, focus on military targets only. As the battle continued, more strange things happened. Human soldiers who were badly wounded refused to retreat. They would bandage their injuries and keep fighting. When ammunition ran low, they would use captured alien weapons. When their positions were overrun, they would fall back in good order, setting traps and obstacles for the advancing Catherians. Most surprising of all, the humans were winning some of the smaller battles. Catherian squads that had expected easy victories found themselves outmaneuvered by human tactics. The aliens had better technology, but the humans seemed to understand warfare on a deeper level. "This is not possible," Zarkith said as he read the casualty reports. "How can such a primitive species cause us this much trouble?" Vexthul was beginning to suspect he knew the answer. The human stories his soldiers had been laughing at were not just entertainment. They were training manuals. Every tale of heroic sacrifice and impossible odds was teaching human soldiers how to fight exactly this kind of battle. The humans were not fighting randomly. They were following a plan that had been written in their stories for thousands of years. Every last stand, every heroic sacrifice, every impossible victory from human history was being used as a guide for this battle. And it was working. The invasion was taking much longer than planned. The Catherians were winning, but slowly and at great cost. For the first time in decades, Vexthul began to worry about the outcome of a battle. On the planet's surface, Amy Carter looked at her tactical display and smiled. The evacuation was almost complete. Her soldiers had bought the time they needed. Soon it would be time for the final phase of the plan, the phase that would teach the Catherians why humans told stories about the Alamo. The battle for New Haven had been going on for 3 days. Commander Vexthul stood in his private quarters, staring at the casualty reports on his desk. The numbers were much higher than he had ever seen in a colonial invasion. His forces were winning, but the cost was terrible. The door to his quarters opened with a soft hiss. 2 guards entered, bringing the human prisoner Jake Morrison with them. The human captain looked tired, but his eyes were still alert and defiant. 3 days of listening to battle reports had not broken his spirit. "Leave us," Vexthul told the guards. "Sir?" one of them asked. "Are you sure it is safe to be alone with the prisoner?" The commander looked at Jake, who was much smaller than any Catherian warrior. Even if the human tried to attack him, Vexthul was confident he could handle the situation. "I will be fine. Wait outside." When the guards left, Vexthul gestured for Jake to sit in a chair across from his desk. The human remained standing, his arms crossed over his chest. "You know what is happening on the planet below," Vexthul said. Jake nodded, but said nothing. "My soldiers are dying down there." more than have died in our last 10 invasions combined. Your people are fighting like nothing I have ever seen." Still, Jake remained silent. Vexthul walked to a large window that showed the planet spinning slowly below them. 3 days ago, my soldiers were laughing at your military stories. They thought humans were foolish for fighting hopeless battles. Now they are not laughing anymore. The commander turned back to face his prisoner. "I want to understand. Help me understand why your people fight the way they do." For the first time since his capture, Jake Morrison spoke. His voice was quiet but clear. "You want to know about our stories?" "Yes." Jake walked to the window and looked down at New Haven. "You think they are just stories. Tales we tell to make ourselves feel better about losing battles. But you are wrong. Then tell me what they really are." The human captain was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to speak, and his words changed everything Vexthul thought he knew about humanity. "When I was a child," Jake said, "my grandfather told me about a place called Normandy. Thousands of young men climbed out of boats and ran across a beach while enemy guns fired at them. Most of them died in the first few minutes, but some made it to the cliffs and kept fighting." Vexthul listened carefully. "My grandfather asked me why those men did not turn around and go home. I said I did not know. He told me they stayed because other people were counting on them. Their friends, their families, their countries. They died so that others could live free." Jake turned away from the window. That story was not just history. It was a lesson. It taught me that sometimes the mission is more important than your own life. "But why?" Vexthul asked. "Why value the mission over survival?" "Because," Jake said, "if good people do not fight for what is right, then evil people will win. And if evil people win, then everyone suffers." The commander thought about this. In Cytherian culture, survival was the highest goal. Warriors who died in battle were considered failures, not heroes. But these humans had a different way of thinking. "Tell me about more of your stories." Vexthul said. Jake smiled sadly. "There was a ship called the Titanic. When it was sinking, the musicians kept playing music to calm the passengers. They could have tried to save themselves, but they stayed at their posts and played until the ship went down. That sounds foolish. To you, maybe. But to us, it shows that some things are more important than our own lives. Those musicians chose to help others instead of helping themselves. That is what we call honor." Vexthul was beginning to understand. These human stories were not just entertainment. They were training. Every tale of sacrifice and heroism taught human children what they should do when faced with impossible choices. "There are thousands of stories like that," Jake continued. "Soldiers who jumped on grenades to save their friends. Firefighters who ran into burning buildings to rescue strangers. Police officers who stood between criminals and innocent people. We tell these stories to our children so they will know how to act when their time comes. And their time has come." "On New Haven?" Vexthul said. "Yes. Every human soldier down there grew up hearing these stories. They know that running away is not shameful if it saves lives. They know that dying is not the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing is giving up when others are counting on you." The commander walked back to his desk and picked up the casualty reports. "Your soldiers are outnumbered 10-1. They have inferior weapons and no hope of victory. Why do they continue fighting?" Jake looked at the reports and then at Vexthul. "Because they are not trying to win. They are trying to teach you something." "Teach us what?" "That conquering humanity will cost more than you are willing to pay." The words hit Vexthul like a physical blow. He had been thinking about this battle all wrong. The humans were not trying to defend New Haven. They were trying to make the Cytherians think twice about attacking other human worlds. "Every human world you attack will fight like New Haven. Jake continued. We will make you pay for every planet, every city, every building. You might win each battle, but you will lose so many soldiers that victory will feel like defeat. Vexthal sat down heavily in his chair. You are using your own people as weapons. No, Jake said firmly. We are using our willingness to sacrifice. For others as a weapon. That is different. Your soldiers fight because they have to. Our soldiers fight because they choose to. The commander thought about his own troops. They followed orders and fought bravely, but they did so because of discipline and training. If the battle looked hopeless, they would retreat or surrender. That was considered smart tactics, but the humans on New Haven were not retreating. They were not surrendering. They were fighting harder as the situation became more desperate, just like the people in their stories. There is something else, Jake said. Your soldiers laugh at our stories because they think we are weak. But those stories are not about weakness. They are about strength. The strength to do what is right, even when it is hard. I am beginning to understand, Vexthal said. Are you? Then you understand that this battle is not really about New Haven. It is about showing you what will happen if you continue to attack human worlds. We are not just defending a planet. We are defending the idea that some things are worth fighting for. The commander stood up and walked to his communication console. He pressed a button and spoke to his bridge crew. Give me a full tactical report on the ground battle. A few minutes later, the tactical officer appeared on the screen. Sir, we control most of the planet, but the humans are still fighting in the capital city. They have turned every building into a fortress. Our advance has slowed to a crawl. Casualties? 3,000 dead, 5,000 wounded, sir. The humans have lost about the same number, but they keep fighting with the same intensity. Vexthal closed the communication channel and turned back to Jake. Your people are going to lose this battle. I know, Jake said, but we are going to win something more important. What? Your respect and your fear. After this battle, every time you think about attacking a human world, you will remember New Haven. You will remember how much it cost you to win here. And you will ask yourself if it is worth it. The commander realized that Jake was right. The battle for New Haven was changing how he thought about humanity. These were not the weak, primitive creatures his soldiers had been laughing at. They were something much more dangerous. They were people who believed in something bigger than themselves. Your stories, Vexthal said, they are not just history, they are weapons. The most powerful weapons we have, Jake agreed. Because they teach us that some things are more important than our own lives, and that makes us impossible to defeat. Vexthal understood now why the human prisoner had never broken under interrogation. Jake had been prepared for this situation since childhood. Every story he had heard about heroic prisoners had taught him how to act when captured. The commander looked out at the planet below, where his soldiers were still fighting and dying. He was beginning to realize that winning this battle might be the worst thing that could happen to the Catherian Empire, because it was teaching the humans that their stories were not just tales, they were prophecies. And prophecies had a way of coming true. The fighting on New Haven had moved into the capital city. Catherian soldiers moved carefully through the streets, checking every building and every corner. They had learned that humans could turn any place into a deadly trap. Commander Vexthal walked through the medical bay of his ship, looking at the wounded soldiers. Many of them were young warriors who had expected an easy victory. Now they lay on medical tables, their bodies broken by human weapons and human determination. Sir, called out the ship's medical officer, we have a human prisoner from the surface. He was wounded, but he might have useful information. Vexthal followed the doctor to a bed where a human man lay with bandages, covering his chest and left arm. The man's uniform showed he was a medic, someone who helped wounded soldiers. His name tag read Collins. "I am Sergeant Pete Collins," the human said when he saw the commander. "I was helping wounded soldiers when your troops captured me." "You were treating our enemies," Vexthul said. "I was treating people who were hurt," Pete replied. "That is what medics do. We help anyone who needs help, even enemies." The commander found this strange. Cytherian medics only helped their own forces. Helping enemy soldiers was considered wasteful and dangerous. "Tell me about the human defense plans," Vexthul ordered. Pete shook his head. "I cannot do that. But I can tell you something else. Something that might help you understand what you are fighting against." "What? Stories?" "The same stories your soldiers have been laughing at." Vexthul sat down in a chair next to the bed. After his conversation with Jake Morrison, he was beginning to realize that human stories were more important than he had thought. "My great-grandfather fought in a war on Earth," Pete began. "He was a medic, like me. During one battle, he saw an enemy soldier who was badly wounded and calling for help. The smart thing to do was to ignore him and help his own people first. But he did not do the smart thing," Vexthul guessed. "No, he crawled across the battlefield under enemy fire and saved that soldier's life. When people asked him why, he said that a wounded person was not an enemy. They were just a person who needed help." Pete looked at the Cytherian commander. "That story taught me that being a good medic means helping everyone, not just your own." Sighed. "It taught me that mercy is more important than victory." "Your great-grandfather sounds foolish," Vexthul said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe, but because of him, I have saved the lives of 12 Cytherian soldiers since this battle began. I could have let them die, but I chose to help them." Instead, the commander was surprised. "You helped my soldiers?" "Of course. Wounded people need help. It does not matter what side they are on." Vexthul thought about this. In all his years of fighting, he had never met enemies who tried to save the lives of their captors. It was another example of how humans did not behave like other species. "Tell me more about your stories," he said. Pete smiled despite his pain. "There was a man named Dr. King. He fought for the rights of people who were treated badly because of their skin color. He could have used violence to fight his enemies, but he chose a different way." "What way?" "He chose to love his enemies instead of hating them. He said that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." "That sounds like weakness," Vexthul said. "It sounds like it, but it is actually the hardest thing to do. Anyone can hate their enemies. It takes real strength to love them." The commander thought about this. The Cytherian Empire was built on the idea that strength came from conquering others. But this human was suggesting that true strength came from helping others, even your enemies. "There are more stories," Pete continued. "A man named Gandhi who defeated an empire without firing a single shot. A woman named Parks who changed history by refusing to give up her seat on a bus. Ordinary people who became heroes by choosing to do what was right instead of what was easy." "And these stories taught you to help wounded enemy soldiers?" "These stories taught me that every person has value, no matter what uniform they wear. Your soldiers are not monsters. They are just people who are following orders. When they are hurt, they deserve help." Vexthul stood up and walked to the window. He could see the planet below, where the battle was still raging. But now he was seeing it differently. The humans were not just fighting to defend their world. They were fighting to defend their ideas about what was right and wrong. "Sergeant Collins," he said, "why are your people fighting this battle?" "You cannot win. We are not trying to win," Pete replied. "We are trying to teach you something." "What?" "That every world you attack will cost you more than you expect. That humans will never stop fighting for what we believe in. That conquering us will be so expensive that it will destroy your empire. The commander turned back to face the human medic. You are willing to die for these ideas? If necessary. But more importantly, we are willing to live for them. Every human child grows up learning that some things are more important than personal safety. Freedom is more important than safety. Helping others is more important than helping yourself. Doing what is right is more important than doing what is easy. Vexthal walked back to his quarters and called for his intelligence officer. When the officer arrived, he was carrying a thick folder full of documents. Sir, we have been analyzing the captured human files. We found something interesting. The commander opened the folder and saw pages of human text. The title read, Colonial Defense. Manual, Asymmetric Warfare Tactics. This is a training manual for human soldiers, the intelligence officer explained. It describes exactly how to fight an enemy with superior technology and numbers. Vexthal read through the pages. The manual described tactics that the humans on New Haven had been using. How to turn every building into a fortress. How to make an enemy pay for every advance. How to use civilian evacuation as a weapon to demoralize attackers. This manual predicts everything we have experienced in this battle, the intelligence officer continued. It is as if the humans knew exactly what we would do and how we would do it. The commander kept reading. The manual talked about the psychological effects of prolonged resistance. How fighting against determined defenders would make attackers question whether conquest was worth the cost. Sir, the intelligence officer said, there is something else. We found similar manuals for fighting in space, for guerrilla warfare, for resistance movements. The humans have been preparing for this kind of war for generations. Vexthal closed the folder. How many other human worlds have these manuals? All of them, sir. These tactics are taught in every human school and military academy. Every human soldier knows how to fight this way. The commander felt a chill run through his body. The Catherian Empire had conquered 47 worlds in the past decade. Most had surrendered after a few hours of fighting. But if every human world fought like New Haven, the Empire would bleed to death trying to conquer them. There is more, sir, the intelligence officer said. He handed Vexthal another document. This is a communication we intercepted from the human government. They are calling New Haven a success. A success? They are losing the battle, but they are winning something else. This battle is being broadcast to every human world in the galaxy. They are showing other humans how to fight us. New Haven is not just a colony being conquered. It is a training film for the rest of humanity. Vexthal sat down heavily in his chair. The humans had turned their own defeat into a victory. They were using the battle as a way to teach other humans how to resist the Catherian Empire. Sir, the intelligence officer said quietly, I think we have made a terrible mistake. We thought we were conquering a weak species, but we have just taught them that they can hurt us. We have made them more dangerous, not less. The commander looked at the casualty reports on his desk. 3,000 dead, 5,000 wounded. More losses than in 10 previous invasions combined. And this was just one small human colony. How many human worlds are there? He asked. Over 300, sir, with a total population of nearly 2 billion people. Vexthal did the math in his head. If every human world fought like New Haven, the Catherian Empire would lose its entire military force trying to conquer them. The humans had found a way to turn their weakness into strength. They were using their own willingness to die as a weapon against their enemies. Sir, the intelligence officer said, what are your orders? The commander stared at the folder full of human documents. These were not the records of a primitive species. They were the battle plans of a civilization that had been preparing for this war for centuries. Get me a communication link to the High Command, Vexthul said. I need to speak to the War Council immediately. Yes, sir. What will you tell them? Vexthul looked out at the planet below, where his soldiers were still fighting and dying. I will tell them that we have awakened something we do not understand. Something that might destroy us all. The intelligence officer looked confused. Sir? These humans, Vexthul said, they are not fighting for territory or resources. They are fighting for ideas, and ideas are much harder to kill than people. He picked up one of the human story files from his desk. It contained tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when faced with impossible odds. Stories that had seemed like foolish fairy tales just a few days ago. Every human CH. The final battle for New Haven was about to begin. In the capital city, the last group of human defenders had gathered in the government building. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Carter stood in what used to be the mayor's office, looking out at the Catherian. Forces surrounding them. Her communication officer approached her with a handheld device. Colonel, we have an open channel to the Catherian fleet. They can hear everything we say. Amy nodded. She had been waiting for this moment. The evacuation was complete. Every civilian had been safely transported away from the planet. Now it was time for the final lesson. This is Lieutenant Colonel Amy Carter of the New Haven Defense Force, she said into the device. I want to tell you a story. Aboard the Catherian flagship, Commander Vexthul listened carefully. He had already spoken to the High Command. The withdrawal order had been given. But first, they had to finish this battle. Many years ago on Earth, Amy continued, a small group of soldiers defended an old mission building called the Alamo. They were surrounded by thousands of enemies. They knew they could not win. They knew they would all die. But they chose to fight anyway. The human colonel's voice was calm and clear. She did not sound like someone about to die. People used to think the Alamo was a defeat, Amy said. All the defenders died. The enemy won the battle. But they were wrong. The Alamo was not a defeat. It was a message. Vexthul found himself leaning forward, listening intently. The message was simple, Amy continued. Some things are more important than survival. Freedom is more important than safety. Protecting others is more important than protecting yourself. The men who died at the Alamo knew that their sacrifice would inspire others to keep fighting. In the command center below, Amy's soldiers prepared for the final assault. They checked their weapons one last time and said goodbye to each other. They were not afraid. They had grown up hearing stories like the one their colonel was telling. The Alamo defenders bought time with their lives, Amy said. Time for their friends to prepare. Time for their people to organize. Time for their cause to grow stronger. And because of that time, they eventually won the war. Sergeant Pete Collins, who had been released in a prisoner exchange, stood next to Amy. His wounds were bandaged, but he had refused to leave with the civilians. Colonel, he said quietly, the Catherians are beginning their final assault. Amy nodded but continued, speaking into the communication device. Commander Vexthul, I know you are listening. I want you to understand what is happening here. We are not trying to hold this planet. We are trying to hold an idea. Outside the building, Catherian soldiers advanced carefully through the streets. They had learned to respect human tactics over the past few days. Every doorway could hide a sniper. Every building could be trapped. The idea is simple, Amy said, that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose to serve something greater than themselves. That freedom is worth fighting for. That love is stronger than fear. Lieutenant Zarkith led a squad of Catherian soldiers toward the government building. He was no longer laughing at human stories. He had seen too many of his friends die in this battle. The humans had taught him that their tales of heroism were not jokes. They were prophecies. You came here expecting to conquer a weak species, Amy continued. Instead, you found something you did not expect. You found people who believe that some things are more important than their own lives. Commander Vexthal watched the tactical display on his bridge. His forces had surrounded the last human position. The battle would be over in minutes. But he no longer felt like he was winning. Every human child grows up hearing these stories, Amy said. Stories of people who chose to sacrifice for others. Stories of ordinary heroes who changed the world. We do not tell these stories to entertain our children. We tell them to prepare our children. The first Cytherian soldiers reached the government building. They could hear Amy's voice echoing through the empty streets as she continued her broadcast. We prepare them for moments like this. Moments when they have to choose between safety and duty, between running away and standing firm, between serving themselves and serving others. Inside the building, the human defenders took their positions. They had maybe 50 soldiers left, facing thousands of Cytherians. The odds were impossible, but that did not matter. They had heard impossible odds in stories all their lives. Commander Vexthal, Amy said, you thought our stories were lies. But you were wrong. Our stories are not about the past. They are about the future. They are about what we will do when our time comes. The assault began. Cytherian soldiers poured into the building from every entrance. The humans fought back with everything they had. They moved from room to room, making the aliens pay for every step forward. And our time has come, Amy said over the sound of gunfire. Right here, right now. We are going to show you that the stories are true, that humans really will fight impossible battles, that we really will for what we believe in. A battle moved up through the floors of the building. Human soldiers fell one by one, but they never stopped fighting. They used their knowledge of the building's layout to ambush Cytherian squads. They set traps and created choke points. But more importantly, Amy continued, we are going to show the galaxy that you can be hurt, that the mighty Cytherian Empire can be made to bleed. That conquest has a price you might not be willing to pay. Commander Vexthal received a priority message from the High Command. It was marked urgent. He opened it and read the first line. Cytherian fleet detected near human border, preparing immediate withdrawal. The message explained that other alien empires had been watching the battle for New Haven. They were studying Cytherian tactics and casualties. Some were beginning to question whether the Cytherians were as invincible as they claimed. Sir, his communication officer said, we are receiving reports from across the fleet. Several alien governments have sent messages asking about our casualties in this battle. Vexthal realized what was happening. The humans had not just fought a battle. They had performed a demonstration. They had shown the entire galaxy that the Cytherian Empire could be resisted. On the planet below, the battle reached the top floor of the government building. Amy Carter and the last few defenders were surrounded in the mayor's office. But she was still talking into her communication device. To every human listening to this broadcast, she said, remember what you have seen here. Remember that ordinary. People can stand against any enemy if they are willing to pay the price. Remember that freedom is not free, but it is always worth the cost. Lieutenant Zarkith burst through the office door with his squad. He expected to find terrified humans begging for mercy. Instead, he found soldiers standing calmly, their weapons ready. Colonel Carter, Amy said into the device, signing off. New Haven Defense Force, mission accomplished. The final firefight lasted only a few seconds. When it was over, the government building was silent. The battle for New Haven was finished, but Commander Vexthal knew that something much larger had just begun. Within hours of Amy Carter's final broadcast, messages began arriving from across human space. Every human colony was preparing for invasion. They were building defenses, training militia forces, and teaching their children the stories of New Haven. More disturbing, messages were also arriving from other alien species. Conquered races that had given up hope were beginning to ask questions. If humans could resist the Catherians, maybe they could too. "Sir," the intelligence officer reported, "we are detecting unusual activity in the Centauri sector. The species we conquered there 3 years ago appear to be organizing resistance cells. And the Vorthan Empire is asking for details about our casualties here," added the communication officer. "They want to know if humans are really as dangerous as the reports suggest." Vexthel walked to his quarters and found Jake Morrison waiting. For him, the human captain had been released as part of the withdrawal agreement. He was preparing to leave the ship and return to human space. "You got what you wanted," Vexthel said. "Did we?" Jake asked. "We lost the planet. Most of our people are dead. But you won something more important." Jake nodded. "We won time, and we won respect. Your empire will think twice before attacking another human world." "It will think more than twice," Vexthel admitted. "The High Command has ordered a complete withdrawal from human space." "We are declaring your territory off limits. That is good. But it is not enough." "What do you mean?" Jake smiled. "You think this was about stopping your empire from attacking us. But it was about something bigger. It was about showing the galaxy that empires can be resisted." Vexthel felt a chill. "You are trying to start a galactic rebellion." "We are trying to start something better. We are trying to start a galactic awakening. An awakening to the idea that freedom is worth fighting for. That ordinary people can stand up to tyrants. That empires fall when people stop being afraid of them." The human captain walked to the door of the quarters. "Thank you, Commander." "For what?" "For helping us tell our story. The story of the Catherian. Commander who learned to respect human courage. Who realized that some species cannot be conquered because they refuse to be conquered." Jake paused at the door. "That story will be told on every human world for generations. And every time it is told, people will remember that Eve